Good morning. 2.5 inches of rain last night. We really needed it, let me tell you. So this is a great morning to talk about polycropping. You know, I'm going to get excited because I think this is all about balance. We're going to be fighting to get our summer annuals out here. If it rains again, they're going to hate life because they're in a saturated, cold environment. So how can we use multiple crops to make this all work? I'm just going to splurt it all out. It's all about balance. And these are the main factors. Time in reproduction, time taking in water, time taking in liquid, sunshine, electromagnetic energy, which makes food. How do we increase time? Water. How do we balance that out? How do we find a better equilibrium? Sunlight, replacing cost. You know, your plants just want carbon. We can get it from the sun. We can replace nitrogen. How do we get more shapes? How do we get more food to the microbiology that makes it all work? Nutrients. How do we get more efficient? And one thing I really haven't talked about is this carbon. You know, the equilibrium carbon, 12 to 1, 15 to 1, something like that. You know, we got these high carbon crops and it really ties things up. How can we find this spectrum where we're in a better? And then elasticity. So first and foremost, I met James Bates a couple weeks ago. Brilliant fella. I'm going to work with him this year. So we're going to talk about two things, kind of the relay cropping and also this skip row corn soybean scenario, which I'm so excited about because I haven't really met many people that really get this elasticity. So he came to me and he said, you know, he worked in Hawaii as a plant breeder for several years and he saw this heat spectrum of how plants weren't reacting well with too much light. So, a little experiment here. I've got one light in here. Notice how that light opens up the whole room. If I did a little corridor right here where it shut off all the radiant light and just went right here, a plant can get too much direct sunlight. It can be too cool. And I think that's what he's really going after here. And what we're basically doing is planting corn in skips. And I don't know all the exact configuration, but he's figured it out through time that if he can get the corn plant, say, 6 feet away from each other, there's enough light for the soybeans to have a yield advantage. And we actually use the corn stays in place, the earth spins and the sun's going back and forth, so the beans are getting direct sunlight, then it's getting shade. But it's always getting radiant sunlight because there's tons of that energy coming in. So it's a better equilibrium. And what he's figured out is corn has the genetic potential to put on 2.2 pounds. You know, the 31-year plant put a little bit more than that, but my kid was pissing on it every morning, and it had, quite a bit of manure underneath it. But what if we went more towards 2.2 pounds instead of 0.3 when we're planting 35,000 of it? And this is what's really, I think, can be revolutionary. If we can figure out how to do this regeneratively, we can put a little starter on each soybean plant, and then it runs off the sunlight. And all that energy goes back, and it's just a lot more efficient. But anyway, I digress. We'll talk about this later. I've got this time-lapse camera right here. We're going to have that on that, and you kind of see how that works. But going back and kind of talking about time, you know, this is why I really go towards having something growing starting in the fall, waking up in the spring. It all gets a chance to equilibrium this out. So you've got to start thinking about all of these angles. And that's why we've gotten wider, is we need enough energy for these beans, just like they are right here, to grow actually better than if they were placed out in this wet soil and trying to start this annual from seed in this wet environment. The wheat or corn or rye or barley can actually make this in a better environment. We're going to have a different temperature right here in the center. This is going to have more direct sunlight, so during the course of the day, we get a lot more heat. So you're not cooling that whole thing, but it's a little bit more even right in here. It's pretty cool when you go out there with a shovel and see how that's all working. But I think we could get in a system where we're following this with this, and we're always around this, and we're always having living roots, and we're always grabbing more sunlight through more shapes. So imagine if you're in your car. I think this is the best analogy. If you're in Tennessee and you're down in Gatlinburg, and the crow can fly 5 miles to the next town, but the road goes like this, and you got to drive 50 miles. That 50 miles is all these leaves on a corn plant, is all these leaves on a wheat, is all these things, is all this phi right here. It's funny, I talk to people and they go, "Why are you talking about this golden ratio?" This is so important. If we want to get more carbon in the soil, we need more time of that happening. We need more light. We need more shapes. We need more days. But also on top of that, if your plant is stressed, then it's not going to grow right. If it's tied up with carbon too much, if it's got too much water and it's saturated, if it's got too little of water. So we got to find this balance of how much population are we going to plant for our latitude and climate. What's the spacing going to be to have enough energy to here? You know, what's the spacing here? And once we figure this out, then we can say, okay, we're going to plant 22% of the normal population here, or we're going to plant 11% of this right here. And when you start doing ratios of if I'm spending $110 in seed and now I'm at 11%, and I get 53% of the yield, and I don't miss any out on here and increase it, I'm going to mess this all up. Then that is where you get margins. I learned a valuable lesson when I lost my father. I had a landscape business and I thought, I'll just double down. I bought another guy out, hired him as my manager, paid him, and my revenues went up that year. We brought in like $700,000. But we had to have all these employees, had all this, and it took me about 2 years to dig out of it. And since that day, it's all been about value per minute. And that's why I get so fascinated with all these, spectrums throughout here. I would be a gigolo if you paid me $1 million a minute, but nobody's going to hire me and my reputation would go down. I mean, you got to think about how many different entities can we throw in here to make it all work. All right. All right, good day.